Hello, everyone. How are you out
Hi.
there today? We're here on a Monday StreamCast.
What?
Monday.
I feel like we haven't done this in forever. I don't think it's been that long, but just
It's
somehow it feels like it's been a while.
it's been a while, so long that the Discord was mad at me and had like 8 updates it needed to do before it would let me start a video call. Thus making us a few minutes late here.
Yeah.
Um,
Also, both of us are currently watching sporting events, just
get
different sporting
different
events.
different sporting events, both more popular in other countries than they are here.
Ours. That's true.
Um,
Although the one I'm watching is in my country, but
True,
no one in my country cares about it, which is
true.
what's funny.
Um, yes, I'm watching greatest sports team in the world, Manchester United Football Club. And Jess is watching people hit a ball with a net on a stick. Um,
I was confused for a second. I'm like, well, they're not hitting it with the net; they're hitting it over the net. But then I think I saw where you're going there. I'm watching the great Andy Murray make his first year comeback. Um, Andy Murray is, of course, British when he wins and Scottish when he loses. For those of you watching at home, he's at match point. Oh my god,
I'm currently watching Manchester United lose now, so
it's fine.
that's fun. So instead of talking about that, let's talk about
Let's talk about what
something
we're here to
different.
talk about.
Transitions are awesome. Um,
Right? We're just gonna go to the next period. I don't know. That didn't even make sense.
so, what we want to talk about today is a novel that both of us have read, and it's been out for a little while now.
Hmm.
So this is maybe not the most timely of things, but we want to talk about Thrawn Alliances. So
Yes.
this is by Timothy Zahn, obviously, and now United are losing by 2 points, and I just have to stop looking at the television.
I know that feeling.
But anyway, Timothy Zahn has
Is the
creator of
person
yes is a
he writes books.
right about Mithranduro. How I don't,
Myth myth renewed. Who's the guy on in the Star Wars Twitterverse? Jim something. He
yeah
does like the fan Star Wars comic. He's been doing amazing tweets.
yeah I've
Between
seen
Anakin and
you liking those, um, but but so there were a couple of books and legends about Thrawn, and then was it last year that the first Thrawn novel in New Canon came out, or was it the year before?
um, I think it was the year before because it came out. Maybe it was Yeah, I got it right here. I can look at it. It was Thrawn came in season 3 of Rebels, right? He was
Right,
in 3 and 4 of Rebels,
right.
so it would have been before season 3 started. So I feel like it might be. Oh, I forgot this copy came with a poster. That's a happy surprise.
That's also
That I
signed, isn't it?
Pardon?
Didn't you get a signed copy of the first book?
No, I have a signed copy of Scoundrels
Oh,
by
that's
Zahn.
that's what it was. I know you had a signed
This
thing.
says 2017, so I guess he's just been
So
cranking these out.
yeah, so Thrawn Alliances is the sequel to that in a way, to the first just Thrawn novel, and it's really interesting to me. One of the things that I liked about it is that it technically takes place in two different time periods. So
Yeah.
there is a Clone Wars era story, which was alluded to in the first book, and
Mhm.
then there's also an Imperial era story that kind of goes along with that, and the two are related to each other.
Mhm.
And before we talk about details, it's worth pointing out that this is going to be a very spoilery.
Super spoilery.
Yep. So if you care about spoilers for the book, or if you haven't seen seasons 3 or 4 of Rebels that
Mhm.
include Thrawn, um, then you might want to watch out for
Yeah.
that, because even though we are big fans of not spoiling Star Wars, uh, this
Very
book has
big
been out
fans.
for a month now, so I'm
Yeah.
assuming that if you haven't read it, it's because you don't want to, or at
Right.
least aren't planning on it as of yet.
Right.
Um,
Uh,
but what was
I
like
was gonna.
just your overall impression of the book?
My overall. I have to say that Well, first off, the two time periods thing was immediately making me think of Last Shot. I feel like this is
Yeah,
a thing
me too.
Lucasfilm has been doing a lot. Oddly enough, in both books, I preferred the past timeline more than the present.
Right.
um, but overall, I really liked it. I thought it was slow in the beginning. I was like kind of forcing myself to get through the first third of it, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then I was loving it at the end. But that's pretty typical of a Zahn novel. I figure he's kind of like a slow burn,
Yeah.
right? Like it kind of feels that way thinking back, even on the original Thrawn trilogy, is that he very slowly kind of builds this world, and to enjoy it, you have to like being in that world. But then all at once at the end, you're like, what the actual frick is going on, and you're freaking out. And that was
Right.
definitely happening in this book.
Yeah. And I feel like I thought the big reveal of the book was going to be that Thrawn knew who Vader was, and
Mm-hmm.
that was a reveal in the book, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like that was the thing that was central
Right.
to the story the way that I anticipated that it would be, because that's kind of how I felt like it set it up in the first novel
Mm-hmm.
was. Because Thrawn is talking about, hey, I did a thing with Anakin Skywalker at one point, and
Right.
as like a way of giving us some information that he might know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I thought that was going to be more central to to the book than it was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I liked the novel a lot. I feel like this is a novel though, and I don't say this to be down on the novel, where I liked
Mm-hmm.
the parts more than the sum of the parts. Um,
Yeah, I can understand that completely.
there are a lot of things I liked about this novel, and I feel like I liked those things more than I liked the novel.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that I liked about both stories. There are things I liked about all the characters, and about kind of the overall point. But I feel like this is one of those things that for me, we want to be honest but not negative here on
Right.
Port Haven.
Right.
But I feel like this probably doesn't make my top five
Right.
um, books in new canon. It's hard for me to make lists like that. But, but
Right.
but even though there were a lot of things I loved, I feel like the whole thing just didn't resonate for me the way I thought it might, or the way that
Mm-hmm.
the first novel did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we can talk about any of those parts or anything like that. But that was just kind of my overall impression of things, um, as
Yeah.
it regards to like the book as a whole.
Well, I think that's interesting because I saw a lot of people online comparing it to the first novel, which makes a lot of sense. And I feel like the two novels, even though they're arguably like in a series, quote unquote,
Yeah,
um, I feel like they serve very different functions.
yeah,
So the first Thrawn novel, I like both of them. I would say I probably ended up liking the second one more. I didn't feel that way when I started it, but I did when I ended it.
yeah,
But to me, the purpose of the first Thrawn novel really was to re-canonize Thrawn in a
yeah.
way to make fans like us happy,
Hmm.
right? Like you, even though it's different time period, different order of things, different characters,
Right,
the character of Thrawn in the first novel was very much the expanded universe Thrawn
right,
that we knew. Um, and it felt very familiar, but in a good way, in a way that
right,
takes this very treasured character and brings him back. Thrawn Alliances was taking this character we knew and then putting him in scenarios that we never really saw him in.
right.
And there are things about it that I think are very different. And we can I kind of can point those out because I know certain ones of those are points I know you already want to bring up. But just even little things on how Thrawn deals with force sensitive people, I feel like our things are just different
Right.
than Legends. And for me, I just kind of appreciated reading something that was different as opposed to reading something that was like, okay, this literally feels like the same Thrawn. Then again, I don't know if you remember, but I was really underwhelmed by the twist in the first Thrawn book.
Right. Yeah.
I got there and Thrawn was like, "It was you the whole time," and I'm like, "Wait, I was supposed to be trying to figure out who this guy was. I literally didn't care about him." I was like, "Okay, I guess this is the plot. That's fine." So that was part of it there, but
See, and I kind of feel like, so you and I talked about this already, and I think we may talk more about this eventually too. But the idea that Thrawn, like so many Star Wars characters, is meant to be that Mary Stew or Gary Stew, whatever you want, however you want to genderize that. But so like Thrawn is meant to be really good at the things that Thrawn is good at. Like Thrawn's superpower is not the Force. Thrawn's superpower is, yeah, it's my Manchester United tie for all the good that's doing at the moment. But like his superpower is being able to kind of not see the future the way that Anakin and Vader do, which I love the way that Thrawn did that in this, or Zahn did that in this novel. With
cross the name.
Yeah, me too. But his superpower is being able to like look at your culture and your art, and learn about you that way, and be able to say, I can anticipate what you're going to do because this is the culture you're from. This is kind of the way your people think about life and things like that. What bothered me about this book compared to the first book? So in the first book, there's the character of Eli, and I forget his last name.
Vanto?
Yeah, I think you might be right.
Yeah.
But Eli is there in the first book, and Eli is not so much a counterpoint to Thrawn as a sidekick, but like that whole story shows or serves to show that Thrawn sucks at politics. Like he is a good military tactician, but he has no skills as it regards politics, and suffers in the Imperial Navy because of it, despite the fact that he has the Emperor as kind of his like personal patron. And in this book, I felt like we didn't sort of see that same kind of limitation for Thrawn, and I feel like that's the thing that was missing for me, and especially when we see Thrawn interact with Vader. I think this book wanted to put Thrawn and Vader like as equals rather than peers, and I feel like they are both definitely skilled at the things at which they are skilled, but one of them is the chosen one, and one of them's a really smart guy. And I feel like that was, and I don't know if it's Zahn projecting this character or Zahn misunderstanding Vader, which I don't really feel like it was that, but there's just something about those interactions between Thrawn and Vader where like there would be moments where Thrawn would say things and I'm like, Vader is going to force choke you now because of the thing you just said and did, and Vader never did that. And I don't know if that's a story thing or if that's a writer thing or like how you would characterize that, but there were a lot of those like not big sort of glaring moments, but just those little things that kind of kept me from getting to the point with this book that I did with the first book.
And I've definitely had those, and that was part of where it was hard for me to get into the book right at the beginning. Like there were different points where it's just, especially being so used to Thrawn the way he was in Legends, and then just remembering this comes off the season 3 finale of Rebels, which I guess spoiler if you haven't seen it, but that's the one with the Bendu, and the Bendu goes like frickin' force storm over the whole planet, and he's wrecking crap. And so here's a guy who has seen just how powerful the Force is, and is still like, I'm just gonna talk to you like you're not Palpatine's right-hand man. And it was very confusing to me. The two kind of points where I eventually explained this to myself, and maybe I'm just making allowances, but it felt part of it. Towards the end, there was a bit where we were reading from Thrawn's perspective, and he's like, Vader could force choke me now. Like they were writing, like he was finally getting it, and he was finally afraid. And I kind of wondered if he hadn't actually been feeling that way the whole book, and had to put on this false bravado to stand up to Vader. And I kind of think part of it is Vader whether he'd never want to admit it, but I think there's a part of him that was letting Thrawn do what Thrawn does because the Jedi knew how smart Thrawn was.
Right.
And he knew it would be a mistake to count this guy short.
Right.
But I think for me, the biggest problem I had with Vader's characterization was the bit where they were going to let the Grisk or whatever, the aliens, get away and like pull the old, put a tracking beacon on the ship thing.
Right.
Which actually just occurred to me is the same trick that Vader pulls on the Rebels later. Vader had it where it was like only he and Thrawn knew about the plan.
Right.
And then it failed because their troopers like stopped the plan. And I'm like, I just don't feel like Vader would not have told his commander.
Right.
Like, why would you not tell your second in command, I'm going to do a thing?
Right.
I don't know.
Well, Anakin, even before Vader, had, I think, a different relationship with his troopers that I think we don't necessarily see with other Jedi. And I think that's a problem for that reason. That Anakin treats his troopers, whether they're the clone troopers or stormtroopers, or the officers among those troopers, differently than other people that we see, and I think that's a good point. And like I don't know, and I understand. In my mind, I guess this was the explanation I gave myself, that A New Hope Vader is more restrained than Empire Strikes Back Vader. I mean, even despite what we see in Rogue One, like I'm imagining like Vader and Tarkin, and Vader is more restrained with Tarkin, and I guess that might have been kind of the relationship that Zahn was going for with Vader and Thrawn, is that kind of like workplace respect, even though like I totally know I could murder that guy with my superpowers, kind of thing. And that's a relationship that Vader and Tarkin have that Vader and Krennic didn't.
Yes.
Which is evidence that Tarkin is better than Krennic. I don't know. That was my big holdup in this thing, is I just feel like the book didn't mishandle the characters as much as just missed it by that much.
Right.
Kind of thing. Like it was almost there, but the thing that it got wrong was enough to make me say like this just doesn't feel 100% right.
I think I kept describing it as I feel like Thrawn is walking around as if he still has Calamari, only he doesn't have Calamari.
Yeah.
Or however you would pronounce it from the Thrawn trilogy, like the weird like amphibian things that could repel the Force. Like Thrawn in Legends would be acting like this, but Thrawn in Legends would have the ability to block you from Force choking him.
Right, yeah.
It's a little bit different. But I mean, it's interesting you bring up his relationship with Tarkin, or Vader's relationship with Tarkin, because Tarkin is another character who we now know from the Clone Wars, where Vader had a relationship with him and respected him as the Jedi. And so I kind of wonder how much of Vader still kind of held on to those old loyalties. Yeah. Especially because what Anakin would have seen in Tarkin was somebody who will get the job done, right? It's not like a relationship he would have had with, Yoda or Mace Windu.
Well, and I feel like, so everything Star Wars says, I think they also made more of a really powerful Thrawn. They didn't want him to make him a joke. They wanted to make him an intimidating character. And I think Thrawn is an intimidating character. When you see Thrawn's interaction with all the characters and Rebels, that goes south for him in the end. Like, I feel like Thrawn is incredibly intimidating, but I feel like it's almost as if they made Vader wary of Thrawn. And that's the part of it that I don't buy. Like, I can even see Thrawn not understanding how powerful Vader is, but like Zahn wrote Vader as if he was not sure about Thrawn, and I just feel like that's not the Vader we know. So maybe for me it's less about Thrawn and more about Vader, because you and I've even talked about this about like Darth Revan. Like as powerful as Revan is, Anakin and Vader are different. Like they're like the character is different, in important ways. And I feel like this book really understands Thrawn and Anakin. Like I feel like those interactions were great. Like I didn't have any problem with that. But with Thrawn and Vader, for me it became a little bit different. And again, it's I'm talking about it as if it made me not like the book, and I did really like the book. But this is kind of my one big hang up.
What you're saying, it was actually something I was about to chime in on, is where I feel like you're right. Like Zahn was just this close to Vader, which of course is a character that I don't think Zahn ever wrote was Vader, unless he might have had small appearances in the Allegiance and Choices of One books. I don't remember.
I never read either one of those, so I don't remember.
I read Allegiances and it was okay, and then I got like halfway into Choices of One. But anyway, that's an entirely different topic. But to that point, I feel like he really gets Anakin, which of course he wrote Anakin in Outbound Flight, if you've read through that book. But I think he really got Anakin, and I think he really got Padme just very well.
And I wanted to talk about Padme, and well, we can talk about Anakin too. But I loved how Padme is characterized in this book, and we talked about this before. I'm really excited that we're getting a Padme novel next year, because Padme is one of the big three of the prequel trilogy, and there is almost no attention paid to her at all in Legends or in new canon.
we have never had, because I've said this before, I'm not necessarily the most excited for a Padme novel, but I'm really excited we're finally getting one, if that makes sense.
Well, I'm really excited that E.K. Johnston is writing it too.
Yeah, I think she's a very good choice for it.
But I feel like this book understood who Padme was. Like I thought that characterization was spot on. I just thought it was great. But what her whole interactions where she's trying to pretend that her uncle Anakin was going to come save her, and that they're going to get a ransom, but then like she really comes through and like
takes care of herself.
Yeah, like she doesn't need to be rescued. I mean, she needs a ship to get off the planet.
Right.
But
I mean, you can't really hold that against anyone if they can't conjure a ship magically.
But like she goes and busts them out of jail more or less. And like I don't know, it was just such a not like all social justice-y about it, but like she's such a strong character, and it was good to see her portrayed as a strong character. And hers and Anakin's relationship I thought was still good, even though like I love that Thrawn saw right through that.
Oh yeah, like well, I mean, who really couldn't? Like, at that point, I'd be
the Jedi apparently.
Apparently,
the entire Jedi Order is the answer to that question. But it's I loved everything about the Clone Wars story, if I'm being honest.
I wouldn't have changed a word of it.
And all of my problems or confusions came from the Imperial story, which again I still liked, but if we're talking about the two different time frames, like I loved the Sereno.
Yep. That guy.
Was it Duke something?
Diet Count Dooku.
Yeah, I love that. Airsats Count Dooku. Discount Count Dooku. We'll use as many words as I can here. But I even liked that guy.
No. Discount Dooku.
That's the best.
Perfect.
Yep, you win the stream.
That's his name now. Discount Dooku.
All right, well, we can't do any better than that. So follow us.
Stream, everyone.
Hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. Check out our forums. But I really liked that guy. I loved like the big reveal of the story to me was in the Clone Wars part of the story, because I know you want to talk about this too, but I was kind of less interested in the Grisk and in the Chiss children stuff, which I know you have questions about and want to talk about, but like the big reveal in the Clone Wars part of the story is the Cortosis mine, which was Cortosis already in new canon? I feel like it was.
That's a fantastic question. I feel like it would have to have been.
I don't remember exactly where. But
I feel like it's somewhere. I can Wookiee really quick while you continue to talk. Hold on.
But I was excited that Cortosis was there, but the way that they were using it, you know, because I'm so fascinated personally with, and we've talked about this on stream before, but like the difference between like who was supposed to win the war, and you know how exactly was Palpatine using the Confederacy and the Republic to kind of serve his own interests. But this notion that the Confederacy was using Cortosis to put into clone trooper armor, like they were using it for battle droids as well, but that the main plan for the Cortosis was to put it in clone trooper armor, so that during Order 66 they would have lightsaber proof clone troopers.
I am a sucker for Star Wars dramatic irony. Like, I'm just such a sucker for stuff like that.
And like that, like I wonder if there's an alternate universe where Palpatine, because the plan that they were assuming was going to happen was that the Separatists were going to try to make an attack on the Senate by disguising themselves as clone troopers. And I wonder,
isn't that outlandish of an idea?
It's not, and I wonder if there's like an alternate universe where that is what happens instead of Order 66. Like instead of using this, this attack by the Jedi on the Chancellor as a way of taking over the Senate, if there isn't an alternate version where the Separatists just go in and murder all the Jedi and all the senators and win the war that way.
It'd be interesting. It would be, the original trilogy had Infinity's comics, where like the first one was like the Death Star destroys the Rebel base or something, or kills Luke Skywalker. I can't remember how it goes. Like each arc is completely different. Like some key thing changes. I'd love to see a prequel trilogy, Infinities, and have one of them be like the Separatists win the war. What that looks like. Everything Star Wars, you and Django should talk, because Count Dooku is definitely in his top 5 also.
Yeah, Dooku is such an interesting character. As much as I wish he was a character that doesn't exist in the prequels, because I feel like my idea is better. I feel like, for the record, my idea is that Dooku and Qui-Gon should have been the same character. And Qui-Gon shouldn't have died in the first film. But, oh, that's funny, Sarge. But no, Dooku is such a fascinating character to me. I could talk for an hour just about how much I like Dooku. But so I liked getting discount Dooku in this story too. And that whole, like, even with the Cortosis mine, when Anakin's like, I'll just blow it up. And then
so
like, it is. Like, and that's what I loved about the Clone Wars story, is because that is so Anakin, to just be like, we got to blow this thing up, obviously. And Thrawn and
everyone else's plan that has been like orchestrated through this whole novel. We're just gonna blow the thing up.
And Thrawn and Padme are both like, nope, that's a bad idea. And he's like, no, it's good. Like, I'm the superpower guy here. Like, I'm gonna blow it up. And then he like,
I got this.
Destroys the environment of an entire part of the planet. Or like,
I feel
even
so bad for the guy that tagged along with Padme. Low something.
Oh,
I keep wanting to call him like LeFou from Beauty and the Beast, but that was super not his name.
Oh yeah. But like, even so, is it Batu, which is the other planet? But like, even
the planets that will be in the Disney park.
Yeah, which I didn't realize until I was like halfway through the book that was the Black Spire outpost that will be at the park. But like, I loved. I obviously don't remember his name, I guess, but like the bartender at that little bar that interacts with them both times, and like the second time is like, you didn't bring that other guy with you, and Thrawn's like, no, totally different guy with me, because Anakin just like kills everybody. But no, I loved everything about the Clone Wars story.
Real quick, you'd asked about Cortosis. I guess Cortosis had been in A New Dawn. By John Jackson Miller.
That's right, because that's what Count Vidian's doing, right?
Yeah, or at least part of what he's doing. Yeah, so that makes sense. I knew it was in something.
Yeah.
So mystery solved there. But to that point, when I as soon as I read Cortosis, like it my reaction was like, how did I not know that this is what they were going to be mining? Because I thought it was like going to be the Doomium and the Domium or whatever the two minerals are.
Yeah.
And then it was Cortosis, and that makes total sense because I think it's the Hand of Thrawn duology. I remember this scene that like middle school Jess was so into, or it might have been high school Jess, but it was like in the Hand of Thrawn duology, there's a bit where Luke and Mara Jade are like trying to get into a place and they have to like dig through Cortosis, but it shorts your lightsaber out. So they were like for hours like chipping in like one little thing at a time, and they were madly in love and they were going to fall in love and be super happy together. And I was just like reading every page with anticipation.
Well, you know, I'm on record as about Luke and other people.
I mean, you're also on record as being wrong. Then, so.
Well, I'll give you that one if you give me that Tarkin is better than Krennic. So
there's no objective proof of that one, though.
But I know you wanted to talk more about the Imperial story, and I've gone on about the Clone Wars one for a while.
I thought, well, really, in a way, I guess they don't really tie together, but the end of the Imperial story with the Chiss children really interested me. I was trying to read about this before, and as near as I can tell, the concept of using like force-sensitive Chiss kids to navigate hyperspace was not in any way in Legends. This is like a new thing.
Right.
Zahn came up with, and that's a. At some point, I want to talk about Zahn specifically because there's a couple things in this book that I really respect him for. But that was something kind of interesting to me, and just this notion that there were force-sensitive Chiss, and there were enough of them that they were kind of like culturally recognized. Because in Legends, there were force-sensitive Chiss, but there were very, 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 very few.
Right.
And that was part of Thrawn's not understanding of the Force.
Right.
And then just the notion of like it's only in kids and it dissipates over time. It's primarily in females, which I thought was interesting. There was a whole lot going on there that I feel like was just vague enough. I feel like if we ever get the follow-up to what Eli's been doing in the outer regions, that would be a good thing for them to bring up and talk about.
I feel like that fit more in a new canon understanding of the Force than it would have in Legends. In that I feel like new canon has shown us, like, I'm referencing Legends of Luke Skywalker, and none of that may be canon, but I feel like we have seen how a lot of other people use the Force.
Right.
And this notion that, because it was that it's primarily in children, and they lose it over time, and it's primarily in the females, but it was also more or less limited to foresight also.
Right.
Like at least we didn't see them, being telekinetic or having other Force abilities that we associate with Jedi and Sith. It was more or less just having this kind of ability to anticipate the future. So it was limited in that way also.
I think I'm really curious about the detail that it's only in girls. First off, as a massive BioShock fan, that made huge connections for me that don't count for anything. And I'm gonna make Sarge cry when I say that, but that's okay. I kind of wonder, is that a detail because culturally we would find young girls more vulnerable than young boys, and so it somehow makes it like worse?
Yeah.
Is it just making it one gender makes it stranger? Is it making it mostly girls because that keeps Thrawn that one more step separated from ever understanding the Force because he's male? All of the above, I don't really know, but I thought that was kind of an interesting detail to include.
The way that I read that was basically that, as keeping it Thrawn removed from it, and the same with it fading over time. I thought that both of those details were things, obviously not from a story perspective, but from like a creative perspective. Like I feel like if Thrawn was also a Jedi, that would be too much. And so I feel like that was that was Zahn's kind of way of setting boundaries to say,
Right.
like, here's an interesting thing where the Chiss can use the Force, but it's going to be in universe in such a way that it doesn't apply to Thrawn. So
Right.
it's not
Just
specifically about
don't
Thrawn.
get any ideas.
Yeah.
Thrawn can never, you know.
Because I mean, honestly, I feel like if Thrawn were Force sensitive, it would undermine what's great about Thrawn.
Yeah, I agree.
In that
Yep.
Thrawn has this intuition that comes from something other than the Force. But yeah, I thought that was more or less that. But you also had a question. So there's a description in the book that as their Force power fades over time, that the children undergo some sort of sacrifice. And we discussed when we read the book a little bit about what we thought that might mean. But tell me your thoughts or questions about that.
I was very confused by that point. I wasn't sure if, at some level, it felt like the implication is maybe they died somehow, like because they had some sort of knowledge, they had to give it up or something. I don't know if it means that they had to, maybe they're alive, but they had to go through some sort of like physical thing. Maybe it diminishes over time because if you use it, you lose it.
Yeah.
Like maybe there's only X amount you have. Like only so much you have to give. So maybe that was a sacrifice. Really, I was very confused by that whole part. And it was one of those moments where, like, I think I texted you about this. It was like Vader and Thrawn were having that moment where they're like, "Oh, do you see? Oh, yes, I see. So you see the thing? Yes, I super see the thing." And I'm just sitting here like, I need an Eli, I need a Pelion, I need someone who's an idiot, to be in this book, to be the idiot, so that they have to explain it to someone, because I have no idea at all what they're talking about.
Right, and I feel like that was kind of my big issue with it too. Is that it just goes unexplained.
Yeah.
And the way that I interpreted it was that something about using that ability like drained them to the point where like they suffered a toll because of it. But like you could very easily read it as once these children were no longer useful, they just sacrificed them, like ritually or something.
Right. Right. That was the vibe I was getting too.
I don't know if anybody's still in the chat. Are we having some stream issues?
It's looking a little bit laggy for me, but as near as I can tell, they can hear us.
Okay, well.
So.
As long as that's good, we'll soldier on here.
Yeah.
But no, so I thought it was interesting. I thought the way they did it was interesting, and I definitely didn't anticipate that being, because they had those like canisters that were like cryogenic canisters, and I definitely wasn't anticipating force sensitive children being the ones that were inside them.
There was one point where Zahn was totally being cheeky, and I was just sitting there reading the words like, "Don't you silly little man." But it was like somebody was like, "Oh, is this a cloning cylinder?" And they're like, "No, it couldn't be." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's so funny, Zahn. We found canisters somewhere. Could they be cloning cylinders?" Like, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
It was pretty good. But then of course it ended up being not that. I think he did that as kind of like an in joke to himself.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking that at least one of them was going to be a clone of Palpatine, just to kind of have that there. And I was glad that that it wasn't that, because clone Palpatine hasn't traditionally worked well for anyone, especially.
Well, just imagine the Snoke theories that'll come if that becomes a thing.
Hashtag not my Luke Skywalker. But
I do miss the days of Zahn though, because he was the one that, like, I think started the whole when Dark Jedi die they explode thing. I don't even know if you remember that.
I do.
It was a very early trend in Legends.
Yeah. Legends was just such a wild place at one point, because like you could just do like, I know you've never read any Star Trek books, But like Star Trek books don't have any like play towards being canonical. You just write whatever. And like there was a point where Legends was like that too. We're just like nobody cares. Just do whatever. Like just
it's Star Wars.
Just write it. Like the Hutts have a super laser. Cool. Why not?
Yeah.
Luke's gonna have sex with a ghost. Sure. You know, toss it all in there. IG-88 was the Death Star. Why not? You know, just
that's one of my favorites. I remember reading that like, sure, let's go for it.
But one more thing. Oh, and yeah, thanks about the song. I'm glad you liked them.
What is it? The EP is coming soon, right?
Yeah, I have thought about putting them out on
right
Bandcamp and stuff, where people could download them if they wanted. But one more thing I wanted to talk about, and we can circle back to anything, but about the Imperial story in particular. So there's a lot made between Vader and Thrawn about Thrawn's loyalties, and so I want to ask you a question, kind of about the topic of loyalty, because Thrawn's whole thing is these Grisks are going to be a threat to the Empire. And they are currently a threat to the Chiss. They may or may not have actually infiltrated the Chiss Empire, or the Chiss ascendancy. And Vader's whole thing is that's not in the Empire's immediate interest. And so pursuing this with Imperial resources is distraction from the rebels, is not in the will of the Emperor, is not loyal to the Empire. So what do you think about that? Because I thought it was an interesting question because I feel like they both have a point. Like Thrawn is saying this is in our mutual interest, and Vader is saying why do I give a crap about our mutual interest and not just the Empire's interest? So what did you make of that?
I could really see where both of them are coming from, and I think really when it comes down to what the difference is Thrawn, well, he's a villain, while he did bad things, while he was involved with, the death of one of our favorite Jedi, at the end of the day, Thrawn is also not evil.
Yeah.
And in the way that Vader is. Right. So in Thrawn's mind, it just makes logical sense. You have these two groups of people that both want to survive, and if they worked together, both could survive. Right. And in Vader's, Sith self-interest, why not let these Grisks distract themselves with the Chiss before they eventually become a problem for the Empire?
Right.
Because then the Empire can defeat the rebels and then deal with whatever else is out there.
Right.
To me, I think that's really the difference. Is Thrawn is, I'd say the difference is Thrawn is an antagonist and Vader's a villain.
Right. I also think
really how I would describe it.
It's interesting too. How do you think we don't get Palpatine's answer to this, but they both think that they are doing what Palpatine would want. So what do you think in that scenario Palpatine would want? I think it's very possible that Palpatine could want the two of them to be doing different things and serving different ends. I think that's probably what's most likely. But I just think it's so interesting that they are both certain that they are doing what the Emperor would want them to do. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why Vader just doesn't force choke the heck out of Thrawn, is because he's not certain that the Emperor is not playing a bigger game that he's just not clued into yet.
Well, and the way I kind of see it, especially if you read the 2015 Vader comic by Gillen, not to be confused with the current Vader comic by Soule. And maybe it exists in that comic too. I've only read the first arc of the Soule Vader comic. I'm very behind. But albeit Gillen's Vader takes place after A New Hope, but so much of it is Palpatine testing Vader and testing Vader's loyalty.
Right.
Because of course Palpatine is well aware that one of these days Vader's going to try to kill him.
Right.
And he's just always trying to figure out, when does Vader stop becoming a puppet and start becoming a threat?
Right.
And I think that in a lot of ways, this whole thing could be a whole gambit on Palpatine's part to see what's up with Vader.
Right.
Is Vader just going to outright kill some dude that just happens to be in the Emperor's favor because he's pissed off?
Right.
And, that would tell Palpatine a lot. Or is he going to trust Palpatine and therefore trust this guy? And that's going to tell Palpatine a lot. And in a lot of ways, I think it could be that. I mean, the bit on the book says Thrawn. How does this go? It's like
it's time for Thrawn to face his
future. Time for Vader.
Face the
time
past.
for Vader to face his past. And I think that could be the two things you're talking about. I think Palpatine could want Thrawn to think about his loyalty, but he really needs Vader to face who he was.
Right.
And I think he knows that. And if you read, like I said, if you read the Gillen comic, you find that towards the end, Vader is about to lose, basically, and he wins because he draws on who he used to be,
right,
but in a way that's filled with hate and anger.
Right.
And so Palpatine doesn't want him to forget being Anakin Skywalker. He wants him to use being Anakin Skywalker.
Right.
And so I think that's kind of what's going on. And then there's the added benefit of, if it turns out the Grisks or whatever are a huge danger to the Empire, they know. Right. And if they're not, they know. So it's also just kind of Palpatine, is always playing two sides. What we were just talking about earlier in the stream, that it's hard to know if the Republic or the Confederacy was supposed to win.
Right.
And I've always held that there wasn't a supposed to. There was a which side won.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that's a little bit of what Palpatine was doing too.
Right. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I was going to ask you about the tagline, actually, because I didn't know exactly. Like, the Thrawn facing his future thing made more sense to me than the Vader facing his past. But I think the way you explained it works for me, especially because did you read Lords of the Sith?
I did. It was a while ago, but I have.
I feel like that's one of the big threads in that too, is that Palpatine keeps throwing it in Vader's face that he used to be a Jedi.
Right.
But he's doing it not necessarily, like, Vader thinks it's to belittle him, but I think it's to, like, motivate him. Like,
right.
Like, you can't not have been Anakin Skywalker. So if you can't change the past, then you might as well figure out how to deal with it and be the Sith that you need to be, or that I want you to be, or that you're destined to be, or whatever Palpatine is assuming.
All of the above there, yeah.
I want to make sure we get one more thing. So what did you think about the inclusion, and I definitely don't know how to say this, of the Marg Sorrel? Yeah, however you say that. Yes.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because that was the last point I wanted to bring up too. That, of any part that you talk about, the parts are greater than the sum. That part, I was floored at how it was handled. Yeah. So back in the Thrawn trilogy, there was a move that Thrawn did that was very, very Ender's Gamey to me, in a way. The enemy's gate is down kind of a thing, where he changes the orientation of a ship in space, and it changes combat because people didn't know how to, like, attack a ship from a different angle. And years later, the Clone Wars referenced this. Right. And Ahsoka does it. Ahsoka pulls this maneuver long before they ever knew they were going to bring... I mean, Thrawn was still in canon, but long before, they were going to have this connection and have him being involved in Rebels, and before they knew they were going to make Rebels and that sort of thing. And then to bring Thrawn back and have this be a maneuver that Anakin and Padme are familiar with, and Thrawn's like, well, what is this? And they explain it. It was more than an Easter egg to me. To me, it felt so gracious on the part of Zahn.
Right.
Because when Ahsoka came on the scene, especially because this is really early on, it's in the first or second season, I can't remember where. I think it's the Ryloth episodes. So whatever season had the Ryloth episodes. Ahsoka was not a popular character yet. She was in no way the character that is beloved the way she is now. She was still very much
Right.
you know, that generation's whatever, that generation's Rose, that generation's Jar Jar, and uh, and for her to take something that was so well known for a beloved Legends character and
Right.
make it her own, and then for Zahn to go, it's okay that Ahsoka had that, and that Thrawn can learn that secondhand through Ahsoka,
Right.
was really, really cool to me.
Right.
And not have it be like, oh, actually, that it's funny that she did that. That's what every Chiss child learns in 4th grade, you know,
Right.
which he easily could have done. And he didn't. He still let Ahsoka be the origin of that move in canon.
Right.
And that really made me happy.
And I think I liked that because it's illustrative of what I like about new canon. Because new canon wants to be a new thing. It wants to be cohesive in a way that Legends, I don't think, ever was.
Right.
But it also wants to say, we're not that different. Like, it's fine with giving callbacks to Legends. It's fine with saying these things are the same. And I feel like that was a good, at the very least, nod to the Clone Wars and nod to, you know, the original Thrawn books and things like that. And I loved it, not just because the reference was cool and not just because Clone Wars, because I think it speaks to the relationship between new canon and Legends.
Yes.
And in the same way that the presence of Thrawn does. You know, because they could have very easily just not included Thrawn in new canon at all.
Right.
Some people probably would have preferred that, but
well, and they could have included Thrawn and not had Timothy Zahn write him. They could have not have asked him back.
Sure.
And instead, Zahn has not only come back and kept his character, but adapted his character to the current canon, which is more than a lot of authors would do.
Right.
It's difficult to do. But with current canon, I've kind of said there's so many things in Legends that are just weird. There's a ton of, I mean, all of these are Legends books. Like, I love Legends. But I always kind of describe it now as a first draft. You know, if you write a first draft of a story, there's going to be some great stuff, and then there's going to be stuff where you're like, is this the chapter I wrote when I was on NyQuil? And I think current canon is keeping all of the good bits and cutting out all the NyQuil bits. And I think that's where it's getting better. It's not actually rejecting anything in the way that a lot of people feel like it is. It's embracing the spirit of it, but making it something new.
Right. One more question that I had for you before we wrap it up, because we're coming up on the hour mark here. What do you think is the future of Thrawn? Because so we've had Thrawn's origin to the Empire. We saw Thrawn in season 3 of Rebels, and we've got this book that gives us kind of both that origin, and it's between season 3 and 4. And then at the end of season 4 of Rebels,
spoilers.
Thrawn and Ezra go with the space whales into parts unknown. But also, the thing that complicates this for me, and you're going to get there a year from now in your Aftermath review. At the end of Aftermath, there's a name drop where Thrawn has been doing unknown region stuff for Palpatine. Have we seen that yet? Or are there more Thrawn stories to tell? I mean, obviously you could tell more stories, but like, have we seen enough of Thrawn in these 2 novels and those 2 seasons to tie into Aftermath in a satisfying way?
First off, I would just like to point out we just got done talking about how great new canon is, and then we had to bring up the space whales, which might sound a little it was great, I promise. Just go with it.
I love the space whales.
They're better than Walladons from the Jedi Prince series. If you ever want to read a book where Luke Skywalker literally saves whales.
Whales feature in my second favorite Star Trek movie, but that's a different conversation.
But I think there's more. I think what I want to know is there more to tell about Thrawn between now and wherever Ezra's story picks up?
Yeah.
Because the implication of the end of Rebels is that Ahsoka the White shows up and gets Sabine at the after Return of the Jedi.
Right.
And they're going to go off and find Ezra. So is Thrawn still with Ezra at that point, and they've just been having the many space adventures of Thrawn and Ezra,
right?
Which, by the way, would be a fantastic Filoni series. As much as I've been iffy on Ezra, just the notion of him and Thrawn having space adventures would be kind of funny. You know, is there? I want to know, is there any more to tell between the end of season 4 and Return of the Jedi?
Yeah.
And is the unknown regions stuff that was talked about in Aftermath, Empire's End, I think specifically the third one.
Yeah, I think so.
What we read about in Thrawn Alliances, or is there something else? And it's been over a year since I read Empire's End, and it's going to be a while before I get to it. So we're going to find out. Stay tuned to my Aftermath series. New video tomorrow, but yeah, I hope there's more. I mean, I think there is either way.
Right.
You know, either he's doing more Empire stuff or he's having space adventures. We'll get Calvin and Tom to write adventures in whale space. We should pitch that to them after the stream.
There you go.
Guys, you need to write adventures in whale space.
I mean, it's interesting to me, though, because, like, I saw an interview the other day with Dave, or I read about it, an interview with Dave Filoni, where he was like, I'm totally not comfortable with people writing my characters. Like, those are my babies, and you have to convince me in order to do things with them. But I also, like, I can't see Thrawn and Ezra being a storyline in Resistance.
Right.
I mean, one, the timeline doesn't work for that, but two, like, I just don't see that happening at all. So, like, I feel like there are stories, I just don't know how or when we're going to get them.
Right.
Because I don't know that they would do it in a novel. But if they don't do it in a novel, then there's really not a whole lot of space for other Thrawn novels, because we filled in those gaps. Like, the first novel got us from when he was discovered by the Empire all the way up to Rebel Season 3. Then this book picks up literally right after Rebel Season 3. And we also get the earlier story that the first novel alludes to. And then Rebel Season 4 ends with Thrawn going out into whale space. And I can't imagine that it's the last we'll see of Thrawn. I just don't know how else.
What else they're going to do.
Right.
Yeah, because I think if there's any Rebels connections to Resistance, I think we're going to see Hera and Jason.
Yeah.
Just as a pilot show, that makes way more sense. Or like Chopper still toddling around or something.
Right.
But I feel like when Clone Wars Season 7 is done, and Filoni, as I understand it, was always like involved with Resistance, but it wasn't necessarily like his thing.
Right.
Who knows? I think he's still going to want to tell that story in some way, and I think Lucasfilm still trusts him. I almost wonder if that kind of falls into the kind of other side of 9 type of material.
Maybe so.
Where a lot of that stuff goes, where they've been really, really touchy about making anything post Return of the Jedi.
Right.
I mean, if I'm excited about anything with Resistance, it's seeing something post Return of the Jedi. Even though I don't think we're going to get anything meaningful until the second season, because we're over a year before 9 comes out. But that's a whole other story.
Well, and speaking of Episode 9, before we wrap things up, Everything Star Wars asks, basically, do we want to see Thrawn in Episode 9? And if not, why wouldn't we want to see Thrawn in Episode 9? And my answer to this would be, one, I don't expect to see Thrawn in Episode 9, because, you know, of these reasons, I don't really know, like, how it would work out. But I don't know that I want to see him either. I feel like there's already so much going on in the sequel trilogy that to throw in that extra thing would take away from what I want to. Not that I don't want to see Thrawn, but I want to see more Kylo and Rey, and I want to see more of Poe's hair. And
I would like to see Finn not be almost completely forgotten by the movie.
Yeah.
9. It's a thing I'd like.
And you know, and there was a rumor. Is it Richard Grant?
Yes.
that he was going to be Thrawn, and he came out in an interview and said he was not.
I think he answered it by going, "Who's Thrawn?"
Yeah.
That was pretty telling.
So I would love to see Thrawn on the big screen. I would love to see. I mean, maybe that's what Rian Johnson's next trilogy is. It's going to be Ezra and Thrawn and the Space Whales.
Yes, I would watch the crap out of a Rian Johnson trilogy.
And Broom Boy somehow.
Broom Boy's there.
But yeah, just kind of on the side. But I just don't feel like it feels negative to say I don't want that, but
right.
Maybe that's adequate explanation for why I wouldn't want that.
Well, and to me, one, I think I get Maul being in Solo.
Yeah.
Was a big door opener.
Right.
Maybe I should still say that's a spoiler, but anyway. But even then, you got to remember Maul was a cameo, and Maul was there for under a minute. And I talked to people who didn't even realize it was Thrawn, didn't even realize it was Maul. They just thought it was another Maul species. And so to me, if Thrawn shows up at all, it would be in some sort of cameo capacity rather than a major role. But to me, I don't want to see Thrawn. Because maybe I have a false impression of the First Order just because of Hux, and Hux is kind of a space Nazi.
Yeah.
But to me, even though Palpatine was xenophobic, and even though Palpatine kind of had his bigoted issues, and there were people in the Empire who were that way, the Empire was really more about subjugation of anybody. Like, it was a we're not racist, we hate everybody kind of an empire. The First Order feels very, very fascist in comparison to the Empire.
Right.
And maybe I'm wrong about that, but I don't think Thrawn would have loyalty to the First Order in the way that he had it to the Empire.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
I think they're just kind of different animals.
Right.
And he would see a difference there.
I can see like an inclusion of Chiss in episode 9.
Yes, absolutely.
But maybe not Thrawn so much. And in the event that there is anything in episode 9, we will definitely talk about that more at some point. But I hope you've enjoyed this conversation about Thrawn. If you're watching this back on the VOD, or if you've been hanging out in the chat, I've enjoyed talking about this book. I really did like this book. I know I was kind of ragging on it for a while, but I really did enjoy this book.
No, I completely get that, though. I feel like some of the books I've enjoyed, I've been the most nitpicky about, because it's like, in a way, it's the same way I feel about Rogue One. I love Rogue One except for when I watch it. It's pretty much how I feel about it. Like, it sounds terrible to say, but it's like when I think about Rogue One, I'm like, that's an amazing movie.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, because it's great. But it's to use a critic line. It's like, we were on the verge of greatness. We were this close, and like that's the part that bothers me.
You love your edit of Rogue One.
I love my edit of Rogue One that exists in my head. And I read all the Rogue One books and pretend my edit happened, and it was great.
But I do think that's gonna do it for us today, though. So I don't know that we have like firm topics for next week. So if you have things,
well, next week Monday is the holiday, isn't it?
Oh yeah, that's right. So we are going to try to do this on Mondays now,
right?
Just because that kind of is how scheduling works for me now. But so we may work out a different day next week. That's possible. But if not, we'll be back the next Monday for sure. And do we want to say things about?
So surprise.
Yep.
I'm superstitious.
Yeah. So there's a thing that's going to happen, not next week, but the week after on our StreamCast that we're excited about.
And it's a really cool thing.
It is a cool thing.
But we're not going to tell you about it.
Not today anyway. We will tell you about it before it happens.
Yep.
And Yagi, you're showing up right as we're wrapping up.
Perfect timing. We're gonna leave. Well, everyone, be sure to check out Sergeant Curry Bance's channel and McYagi's channel and Everything Star Wars' channel. So thank you guys for being here.
Yeah, Yagi's showing up to get that shout out.
Yeah, that's right.
But um, but if you're not already, make sure you're subscribed to us here on YouTube, and hit that notification bell, and you'll get notified when we go live. We're active on Twitter all the time. We are less active on Facebook, but you can follow us there. Sarge just found us on Facebook not too long ago.
There's still that Tumblr page.
Yep, Tumblr is out there somewhere, in whale space.
Whale space.
With
Can that be a thing now?
whale space with Discount Dooku.
With Discount Dooku.
But
and Fred the Jovial Sith.
Yep, all of those, they're just hanging out there somewhere, waiting on you to come find them. You can also check out our forums. We would love to keep this conversation going if you have thoughts about the book or anything else. If you have topics for other streamcasts, we're still looking to fill time between now and Resistance and now in episode 9. So if you have things you want us to talk about, let us know in the comments.
So many weeks of not a Star Wars movie coming out.
I know, it makes me sad. But I think that's gonna do it for us today, though.
Thank you very much.
And we will see you guys later.
Bye.